Extreme Monsters, Book 1, The Blue Moon Effect, Chapter 1, Meltdown. Val gazed up the long hill at the Monstery Valley Extreme Sports Park and cocked his head to one side. He was straining to identify a faint and troubling noise. The 11-year-old captain of the Extreme Monsters sports team had always been a kid who was tuned in to his environment. He could walk into a friend's room and instantly tell if a book was out of place. But being half vampire as well as half human, he also possessed certain supernatural gifts. He could fly great distances in the blink of an eye. He could disguise himself as mist, and he had unbelievably powerful hearing. When he wanted to, he could detect the blink of a dime dropped in a busy bowling alley. At the present moment, Val's amazing ears were focused on a lone figure about half a mile away. The girl was dressed in a full-body suit and leather gloves. She was about to take a practice run down the winding street luge course. It was clear from the disturbed look on Val's face that he didn't like what he was hearing. "Something's up," he called out to his companion, a shaggy-haired werewolf named Wolf. Val lifted the strong sight binoculars to his eyes to get a better view. Wolf, the Extreme Monsters inline skating daredevil, hit a Barani, a front flip where the young werewolf landed facing in the opposite direction from the one he started. "What?" he said. Wolf glided over to the guardrail where Val was standing. Val pointed toward the top of the hill, where their friend Jinx was sitting on her sleek new aluminum street luge, a racing sled on wheels. She'd rolled it into the track's paddle zone several minutes earlier. Now she was rocking it back and forth to get a feel for the wheel action. It was the sound of that motion that had caught Val's attention. "What do you see?" asked Wolf. "Nothing," said Val, "but Jinx's sled is making a weird noise." "Like what?" "It's too faint for human ears, but it sounds like... Val paused and lowered the strong sights, looking a little embarrassed. "Like what?" the werewolf persisted. "Like sizzling bacon, you know, tiny crackles and pops." "Dude, you are kidding," laughed Wolf. "Are you sure you didn't get your signal scrambled? Maybe you're picking up someone's breakfast." Wolf was shaking so hard he nearly fell off his skates. "Scrambled, eggs, bacon, breakfast, get it?" "I'm serious, Wolf," said Val. "I think Jinx's wheel bearings are overheating. I should fly over and stop her." Wolf quieted down. "Come on, Val," he said. "Bearings don't just overheat by themselves. You've got to be going way fast to flame the wheels." Val shrugged. "I know it doesn't make sense. All I'm saying is something doesn't sound right." "Dude, what do you expect? It's a brand new luge. They all sound funny until they're broken in. Besides, Jinx is no beginner. You know how she hates it when we try to tell her what to do. She's a witch. She can take care of herself." Wolf had a point. Jinx would never forgive him if he interrupted her first test drive just because of a suspicious noise. He was also right about another thing. Jinx was a serious athlete. When she wasn't attending spellcasting school or hanging out in Val's garage with her extreme monster teammates, she liked nothing better than to go hurtling down a steep hill on a luge. Although she was only 12, she already enjoyed a growing reputation in California as a skilled luge pilot. She could handle almost any racing challenge thrown at her. Val decided it was probably best to let her fight and fix her own bugs. On this spectacular mid-October morning, Val and Wolf had met Jinx at the track to watch her test drive her new luge on the sports park's toughest downhill course. Jinx's pet, Bela, was there to cheer on his mistress. Bela was a bat and the Extreme Monsters' unofficial mascot, but unlike the other daring teammates, Bela was timid and nervous. Witnessing Jinx whip around curves at 50 miles per hour often caused him to faint. At the present moment, he was hanging upside down from the guardrail with his wings wrapped tightly over his eyes. Suddenly, Val was aware that the strange noise had ceased. He stared through his binoculars again. Jinx was ready to roll. She was sitting very still on her luge. Her legs were extended and her feet pointing downhill. Sunlight glinted off the hard plastic visor of her crash helmet. Seconds passed. Jinx leaned forward slowly and placed her palms on the pavement. Then, in a burst of activity, she began pulling herself forward with all her might. The luge squealed, leaped out of the paddle zone, and sped downhill. "Awesome!" cried Wolf. "She's off to a perfect start." "I'm not so sure," Val noted worriedly. As soon as Jinx had pushed off, the mystery sputtering noise returned. Only this time it was louder. Val tracked Jinx as she whizzed down the slope. She had shifted into a racing posture to lower her wind resistance. She was now lying flat on her back with her arms at her sides. Her helmeted head rested in a protective cone at the luge's rear. Jinx was gaining speed at a terrific rate. She looked like a blurry silver bullet. Then it happened. As Jinx entered the first curve, her luge began to wobble. The rear end shook, then swung wide. Jinx went skidding across the track, nearly slamming into the barrier. She managed to steer her way back to the inside track, but her luge was fishtailing down the straightaway. Val flung his strong sides to the ground. "Come on, Wolf," he shouted. "Jinx's wheels are seizing up. We've got to reach her before the luge flips." The hairs on the back of Wolf's neck stiffened. With a low growl, he hopped atop the guardrail in his skates. He clenched his fists in readiness. "She's going to spew a wheel. What's the plan, man?" Val rose off the ground. "I'll fly over to the luge and grab it from behind," he shouted. "Skate down the track. When Jinx's sled passes by, speed up and grab it from the front. That way, if her wheels go, we can keep her from wiping out. Got it?" "You bet," Wolf replied. What about me?" piped up a small, scared voice from under the guardrail. "Hang in there, Bella. We've got it covered," said Wolf. By the time the nervous bat had mustered the courage to peek out from under the rail, the two extreme athletes were gone. Val was streaking through the air. His aim was to catch Jinx at the second turn. This nasty hairpin curve marked the approach to Cliffhanger Hill, the steepest slope in the sports park. Val reached the spot as Jinx took the corner. He could see she was trying desperately to slow down. Jinx was sitting up on her board to increase her wind resistance and leaning into the curve while she braked hard. with her heels, but the luge was bouncing so violently that she was finding it impossible to dig into the road. Just then the luge rocked, went up on two wheels, and nearly tipped over. Val no longer needed superpowers to figure out what was going on. As Jinx exited the hairpin turn and headed toward Cliffhanger Hill, he saw ribbons of gray smoke trailing from her wheels. He'd been right after all. Something had been sizzling. Jinx's wheels were melting down. It wouldn't be long before they failed entirely. Val swooped down and hovered next to Jinx's luge like a jet fighter escort. Jinx spotted him and gave a wave. Val couldn't tell if she was scared because her face was hidden behind the visor. Pointing toward the underside of the luge, he shouted above the roar, "Your wheels are burning!" Jinx yelled back through her mask, "Val, my wheels are flaming." "I'm going to help you stop," Val shouted. "I can't hear you," she yelled back. "I said I'm going to help you stop." Val was screaming at the top of his lungs. "No use," he sighed. "I'll just have to take it from here." The luge rocketed down Cliffhanger Hill. Dead ahead, Val sighted Wolf. He was skating down the straightaway, hoping to match Jinx's breakneck pace as she whizzed by. Val flew in closer to the luge and grabbed the end near Jinx's head. The luge swerved sharply. "Hey, what are you doing?" Jinx yelled. "Let go of my sled. I'm bringing her in." She raised an arm and tried to push Val away, but Val held on tightly. He began reducing his airspeed. The luge was closing fast on Wolf. He was now only about 10 yards ahead, sprinting his heart out. Jinx lifted her head. She was startled to see the werewolf in the middle of the track. "Wolf, get out of the way," she screamed, but the skater didn't alter his course. "Get ready, Wolf," shouted Val. As the luge overtook the werewolf, Wolf poured on the speed and edged out in front. "No!" cried Val. Wolf knelt down and gripped the luge near Jinx's feet, while Val hit his brakes in midair. Bit by bit, the luge began to slow down. It shuddered and shimmied for another 100 yards, and finally came to a halt near the finish line. Jinx was up off her luge in a flash. She ripped off her helmet and came storming towards Val. Her red eyes were blazing. "What was that all about, you Transylvanian turkey? I ought to turn you into an insect or a flower pot. There was no need to play Mr. Hero. I had everything under control." "Oh yeah?" said Val. "Then what do you call this?" He picked up her luge and turned it over. 3 of its 4 urethane wheels were melted. The metal trucks twisted all out of shape. He blew on the 4th and it fell over. "If Wolf and I hadn't been holding you up," Val said, "you would have been beefed for sure." Jinx gently nudged another wheel. It dropped off and wobbled away. Her jaw dropped. I didn't notice," she stammered. I'm sorry, Val." "Forget it," said Val. "It was a close call, but if I were you, I'd get my money back from the place I bought the sled from." "I hate to tell you this, guys," interrupted Wolf, "but I don't think the luge was the problem." Val and Jinx turned toward the werewolf in astonishment. Wolf was holding one of the fallen wheels in his hand. He was sniffing it carefully. "What are you talking about?" asked Jinx. "This wheel has a strange odor, and I'm not talking about burnt plastic." "What's it smell like?" Jinx said. "Slime," spelled out Wolf. "Slime!" cried Val and Jinx in mutual horror. "Exactly," said Wolf, "and you know what that really spells?" "Sabotage," replied Val darkly.